Adelina, welcome to the podcast. I'm really excited to welcome you here because you work as the CTO Advisor. You've been working with CTOs in smaller organizations, also with CTOs that work in some of the largest organizations with over 100,000 employees. So you also posted this mind map, which compares the CTO roles across the different sizes of organizations, right? So this is something we would discuss today. So welcome again.
Thank you very much for having me, Michal.
Awesome. So before we dive deeper, would you like to elaborate a bit more about the differences? So, the CTO title is always the same, right? No matter whether someone works for a startup or an international corporation. But what are the differences, and how can people know whether they are ready for the next step?
Yeah, the difference between a CTO in a startup and a CTO in a big company, I normally like to split them in at least three different stages of how the CTO role evolves. And as you've seen on the LinkedIn post, it's actually I shared it into five. I split it into five. But let's just talk in the essence of the role and how it changes. When you're in a startup, you likely don't have product market fit yet. In fact, the essence of the CTO role is to build a minimal viable product that proves the concept. There's a proof of concept there, and then you have to have a minimal viable product to show that you can sell something into the marketplace. So often if you're a CTO and there's only you and the non-technical founder, or you and five other engineers, you spend your entire time coding to produce something that's resembling a product. Mm-hmm. When you go into a company where you have 50 engineers, 100 engineers under you, you don't do any coding anymore. It's very, very unlikely you do any coding. And this is where it starts to get complicated, because sometimes some founding CTOs really struggle to become an executive mindset leader, which is how I like to call it, where they have to lead people to a vision and inspire engineers to deliver that vision. But they're no longer the person who should produce production code. They should produce perhaps a prototype or envision or get a design or something like that, but they're not the person who should be hands-on coding that product. And then the third stage, which is the stage when you have like 300 engineers plus in the organization, where the CTO role becomes more of a visionary role, where they look at 3+ years, 3, 5, 10 years, depending on the industry they're in and how long term you can look into those industries. But they look at 3, 5, 10 years ahead to try and figure out what the company's already proven and sellable at scale product will look like in those time frames. So the company slowly, because it's a huge company by this point, slowly moves towards where the market is going to go. They're almost guessing. It's kind of R&D really. But in that second stage that I mentioned, where you have like 50+ to 100+ engineers, often the original founding CTO doesn't get that executive mindset. Therefore, the company often hires a SVP, a senior vice president of engineering, which in essence is actually still 80%, 90% what the company needs. They need someone to deliver the product on time, within budget, while managing a growing team. And then as the company grows, scale production processes while maintaining speed and quality with a significantly larger team. But a lot of founding CTOs can't do that. And this is why they hire a VP of engineering. And then the CTO is moved into a sideways position where they still have the CTO title, but they have not much to do with actually operations of engineering.
And it's so cool to have this laid out this way. But a lot of people who are listening to this podcast, they may wonder, okay, so what do I do? What do I do now with this information? And if I use an example with one of the CTOs who I mentioned before we started recording, he is working with a smaller team, 3-5 people. They are a startup, and now he considers a new opportunity. But the role is the same, CTO, that it sounds the same, but the responsibilities are completely different. But how can he go to the next step? What does it mean for him? I mean, how can he unlock the doors to the new companies?
That's a very good way of putting it. Unlock the doors to new opportunities as CTO, right? Very good. I really loved you saying that. Well, one of the key challenges that someone who was CTO in a company where they have 3 to 5 engineers in their team, one of the things they struggle is that that is more of an engineering lead role. This is not a genuine CTO role in a bigger company. And I think a lot of people get confused. They think, well, I have a CTO job title, therefore my next job also has to have a CTO job title. And they go for the title instead of looking at, well, what do I actually enjoy when I do my work as CTO in this company of 3 to 5 people? Do I enjoy inspiring these people, getting these people and scaling myself through people and getting them to produce a product that I envision? Or do I actually like being the star coder? Do I like being the guy that is the hero who saves the day all the time because he or she knows the code inside out and it's all their legacy code and they know all of that? So one of the key things that I would say is that it's extremely important to understand yourself and what is it that you enjoy doing in your current role and what is it that you don't like doing in your current role. Because then instead of applying for a job title, you are applying for a role that fits your criteria, that makes you happy and the areas you want to develop in, rather than, oh, I was CTO, therefore I have to apply for another CTO role. And then they struggle because actually the benchmark is very, very high. They can't get another CTO role because when they're measured against the CTO role in a company of 10 plus, 50 plus engineers, they don't quite measure up.
Yeah.
And I can happily break that down into smaller steps if you like, but I wanted to kind of give the overview first.
Well, it is actually great that you say it, to have the self-reflection, to say, okay, this was my title, but I'm probably not there with regards to those responsibilities and skills. Have you seen some examples of how people rebrand themselves? And maybe on this note also, would you say that is it not perceived negatively, for example, for hiring managers to see someone going kind of backwards in the career ladder?
Well, that's a very good question, right? So if you have the job title of CTO and you're in a company of 3 to 5 engineers, you are actually setting yourself up for a lot of pressure because you're jumping from engineer, skipping engineering manager, a director of engineering, senior director of engineering, VP of engineering. You're skipping all these levels and going from engineer or principal engineer all the way to CTO. And this gap in experience that you don't have is setting you up for a lot of pressure and actually setting you up for failure if you only look at the job titles. Now, you mentioned about the kind of rebranding and branding. The problem with branding is it takes a long time. Branding yourself online, lots of people say, oh, make your own personal brand online and all this stuff. That's great and good, but that takes years. My brand, the Geek Whisperer, didn't start yesterday. I've been doing it for over a decade. So in my view, the first step is looking at your current role and what you like about it, what you don't like about it. Then the second step is actually asking other people that you've worked with, what do you think I'm really good at? What do you think I'm not good at? And getting an idea of how others see you, because you all will have blinkers and you have blind spots and you'll think you're good at some things. You might think you're good at delivering on time, but actually from your CEO's perspective, they don't feel you're delivering on time at all. But you think you're delivering on time because you cropped up something quickly, but actually when the customer uses it, they still get that error message. So the kind of the first step is that self-reflection, but also then getting feedback from other people you worked with, engineers and people above you or peers. So for example, the CEO, maybe a CPO or a CFO, chief financial officer, chief product officer, or COO, chief operations officer, or a board member, if you have those, asking them from their perspective, how do you come across? And then from that, You can look and decide what kind of jobs do I want to look at, but also look at your own background. What industries did you work in? Did you perhaps develop a specialism of launching wearables, Fitbit types, or did you develop specialism in semiconductors, or did you develop a specialism in products that are wireless, whatever it is, radio frequency technologies or analog technologies, etc. It's really important to look at your background and decide what industries you worked in, and do you still want to work in those industries, or do you want to try out new industries? And then if you want to try out new industries, then you have to be prepared to start from below, from being a senior engineer or just an engineer. And I can tell you, you can see on LinkedIn, there's lots of people who had a job title of CTO for 3 years, and now they're back to engineer in another company. You'll see a lot of that on LinkedIn. I actually created a on-demand course that I haven't launched yet to specifically help people identify this knowledge, the skills gap between where they are and where they should be going next. Because it's actually very, very difficult. Often people really struggle to understand, where do I go next? I've been CTO, where else? Senior CTO? That doesn't exist.
Yeah, it's actually really interesting how you frame this problem, essentially, of skipping some of those standard roles like engineering manager, director, VP, and it's very common in startups, right? The co-founders, they are like, hey, we need to fill this role, let's just get someone, and it's attractive for people who often don't really have that experience. So then what is the next step, really? The startup which is post-funding, startup with 20, 50 employees, and what are the responsibilities of such a CTO?
So Jimin, what are how do the responsibilities change from when you
Yes,
have under 10 engineers and then when you have above?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So when you have under 10 engineers, everybody's hands on deck, right? They're building an MVP, like we said, minimal viable product. Then at stage 2, which I normally label it as scale up series A, they might have customers, but they don't have product market fit usually, even though sometimes they think they do. And they have from 10 to 50 engineers. The essence of the CTO role, which is the key leadership role in engineering, is to deliver the product on time and within budget while managing a growing team. And this is where a lot of CTOs who started out as an engineer, yesterday they were an engineer, today they're a CTO, this is where cracks start to really show, because they don't actually know how to scale themselves through other people. Because now, instead of them producing that code themselves with other people and giving them, oh, you work on this, you work on that, I'll be working on this, instead of doing that, which is more of a team lead role, they have to decide a vision, a roadmap. They have to influence and motivate other engineers to deliver that, and stop themselves from hoarding code and from holding everyone back from producing stuff.
Well, this transition must be difficult.
It's extremely difficult. This is why, in my experience, at least 80% of people who started out as engineer CTO at this stage in that company, when they have 10 to 50 engineers, they either leave the business or the business hires the VP of engineering to take over the production of the technology with other engineers, because they can't separate themselves, and they become like a CTO, but really they're often just another star engineer in the background.
Yeah. Are there any self-assessment questions that a CTO can ask himself or herself just to see whether he or she is there yet or not? Something like, do I do well X, Y, Z?
Yeah, very, very good question. One of the things that they can realize if they would be doing well when their engineering team grows, and I really like your question, would be, how do I bring technology at scale through other people? How well do I motivate other people to deliver this? And how often have I spent time getting other people to learn the architecture and the code that we've created so far, so they're empowered to do it themselves, or do I still do that myself? These are the kind of, again, back to that self-reflection, but also asking other people, do you think I scale myself well through other people? And just see what they tell you. You might be surprised.
Yeah. Well, it's also a question, what does it mean, scale through other people, right? Because this is one of these terms that people can answer yes to. I mean, like, yeah, of course I can do it, but in fact they do not. So
excellent question. So how do you know if you're scaling yourself through other people, right? Maybe we need to talk about that question.
Yeah, maybe.
And I will happily answer, but also if you want, feel free to think about some answers yourself. I'm very happy to hear your own ideas. But essentially, from my perspective, the signs that you scale yourself through other people are that you set a very clear vision. You also set goals to reach that vision. So you tell people what problem you're trying to solve, the why, but you also tell people what the outcome looks like, what good looks like, what are we after, what are we trying to achieve here. And I want to actually clarify something from this point here, because a lot of people think, well, I'll tell them I need all these bugs fixed, right? Well, I'll tell them what the outcome is. The bugs are fixed. That's not an outcome. That is a how. The how is you're telling the engineers how to do it. And most engineers, including the CTO themselves, love figuring out the how. How do I fix that problem? And engineers are problem solvers. But engineers who are truly CTOs, who have an executive mindset, they look at themselves through their performance through the performance of other people. They don't look at their own performance through how much code did I produce and how many features did I produce personally. They look at how did I get my team to deliver this on time. Yeah. And they have a very clear vision and the outcome. So for example, the difference between so the outcome, for example, the what, you tell them the why and the what. The why is the problem, the what is what you're trying to achieve. So for example, if you say to people, I want all these bugs fixed, that's telling them how. But if you say customers need to be able to press this button and it gives them this other window, that is, you see, that actually, then the engineer will work till that button works, not just fixing some bugs that you assume will make that button work. Does that make any sense? So there's that kind of massive difference. And another way, in my view, how you can tell that you're scaling yourself through other people is that and this is, a lot of people don't enjoy this, but you find joy in inspiring those engineers and giving them the mastery and the autonomy to come up with the solutions for that vision and problem that you're trying to solve, instead of you telling them how to do it. That's how you know you're scaling yourself through others. Just a few signs anyway. But do you have any of your own suggestions for this, or is there anything you want to add to this kind of?
No, I mean, it's great how you frame this. It almost feels like a completely different style of communication, because in those smaller teams, it could be a bit more directive, like, hey, this is what needs to be done. This is the problem and this is how you solve it. But what you describe in some of these larger organizations, it's no longer possible because the team is so big and they need to scale somehow through the team leads and directors and everyone.
And here's actually, if I can mention something else that I know you haven't asked me, but I think is really important to make a difference. When we were talking earlier about the difference between a startup CTO and a big company CTO, let's say, has 300 engineers under them or 500 engineers under them. Let's say, if you have, let's say, 500 engineers, right? As a CTO, you will have, and let's say you are the CTO, you're a true CTO, you're not a CTO that's been replaced, really, and you just have the title for the sake of having a title. You will have several vice presidents or one vice president of engineering and several senior directors of engineering delivering the engineering products that you need to achieve the business goals. The difference between that CTO and, let's say, the vice president of engineering, or frankly, the directors, the senior directors or directors of engineering, is that those directors of engineering have been handed down from the CTO The products they have to be working on. However, the CTO, so they're operational people. They make sure stuff gets delivered. However, the CTO themselves has decided, having looked at the market, having spoken to customer success, having looked at the business goals, the business strategy, having spoken to the chief financial officer, they have decided the direction in which that product is going and all of the sub-products that each director of engineering or vice president of engineering will be in charge of. And that is the difference. The difference is the conscious decision of the strategy of where technology is going. And that makes someone a C-level versus a vice president or a director or a head of engineering, someone who's operations, they're just there to deliver stuff.
You just mentioned also something really interesting with regards to the communication with other stakeholders, customer success and operations and everyone. So would you say that this also differentiates as the role of the CTO evolves from the stage 1, stage 2, stage 3? Is this the case or not really?
Well, I mean, it evolves in the sense of let's go back to the mind map of different types of CTO at different stages of company growth. In stage 1, in the startup phase, you probably have a CEO, and if you're lucky, a chief sales officer or a chief marketing officer, right? That's it, really. You don't have more than that. So it's very easy to keep in touch with those people. And also, there is no big pipelines. There are no big market analyses or customer success databases. It's quite easy, very quickly, even in 1-hour chat, to understand where the company is going, what are we trying to prove here, because it's a very small outcome. The outcome is we're building a product that we can test out with customers, right? So that's very easy. The brief is very sharp and easy to understand, usually. The problem is when the company grows, then let's say CEO, CMO, let's say if you have these two people, right? The chief executive officer and the chief marketing officer or chief sales officer, whichever titles you have. Those two roles now become chief operations officer, chief financial officer, chief revenue officer sometimes. You have then all of these people, they have customer success. Then the company has a lot more stakeholders than you had when it was 2 or 3 of you. Therefore, you have to make an active effort to keep in touch with all of these people and understand the challenges they're facing in their own departments because of engineering. And this is where, you always get the fight between sales and engineering, because sales sell stuff for the sake of selling to hit their targets, but actually engineers, sales promise, engineers have to deliver. And that's the big bugbear, right? Because engineering then gets very angry, and this is where a lot of CTOs fall into the trap. Again, inexperienced CTOs, non-executive mindset CTOs fall into the trap of going them versus us. Us engineers, we're working really hard, and sales are putting all this pressure on us. When as a CTO, it's your job to negotiate with sales and negotiate with the CEO and agree certain things and protect your engineers from unreasonable requests.
Yeah. And on this note, I can imagine there are lots of people who have been there, done that. They are on the level as you described. They have been negotiating. They have been engaging with all of these stakeholders. Like, is there any way for them to communicate this on their LinkedIn profiles or resumes, just to, position themselves as those people who meet all these standards, if we can even label it as a standard?
Yeah. So very good question. So one of the mistakes that I've seen a lot of CTOs make in their LinkedIn profiles is that they say things like, I did this. Like, for example, I negotiated with stakeholders. I worked with customer success. I did that. I did that. This is all a shopping list. This is not outcomes. This is not results. This is not how a business strategic person thinks. A business strategic person says things more like, in partnership with customer success, I achieved 20% reduction in cost production, or increased customer acquisition by 50% over 3 years, or increase the profit margin of the business from 20% to 25%, or you see what I mean? It's you're talking about business results, helped produce a pipeline of 20 million in semiconductor, la la la. You're talking about business results rather than a shopping list of things that you spend your time on.
Yeah. Activities.
Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting. And I mean, these days, even ChatGPT can help to generate some of these, which is tricky, right? But we can, use the right prompt to help with this, but it still doesn't guarantee that the person is really thinking this way, right? Because what you mentioned is to have this mindset, to have the executive strategic thinking. So how can someone really develop this strategic thinking to even use some of these terms, casually during a discussion? Because ChatGPT is one thing, it can help us create the LinkedIn profile, but we need to do it every day, right, at work.
Yeah, that's a very good question. I have to tell you, there is a huge need for that. When I speak to CTOs in startups and I ask them to calculate the value of a project we've done together, 9 out of 10 times they really struggle. They can't even process it. When I talk to a CTO in a company of 3,000, 5,000, 7,000 people, they can tell me the ROI straight away. Like they don't, sometimes they might need to sit down and kind of write something on a piece of paper, but they usually have it at their fingertips. And that's the big difference. So the way you can develop that, and I'm really glad you asked this, because I recently started a newsletter called the Executive Mindset for CTOs, because I've seen there's such a huge gap. One of the ways you can develop it is become proactively curious about the impact of your engineering work. It could be your personally or the one of your team, if you have a team, of how did your engineering work impact customer success? How is it impacting customer relationships, customer acquisition, customer upsales? For example, one CTO was saying to me that, customer success is wasting my engineers' time with all these reports that engineers shouldn't even be spending time on. And I'm going, well, have you looked at this pattern, made a case of how you're going to fix it for your team? Oh, no, I'm just complaining about customer success, adding more. So talking to the other departments to understand the business impact of engineering and asking questions like, so how's that helping with our bottom line? How do you see how is engineering not helping with the bottom line right now? And kind of talking to the other people in the other departments to understand, would speed is better than quality. Sometimes they need to show the customer a mock-up, but it doesn't need to work yet. Whilst often the CTO's teams focus on making it work really well, but actually there's nothing to show to the customer, because that in itself can help the company make the sale or not make the sale. So becoming the way you can develop your strategic mindset directly in your current job is always looking to understand and to calculate how is engineering doing this? What's the impact of engineering on this? And sometimes you can look at, for example, how much money you're spending on each engineer. This is another thing that a lot of CTOs don't know. How much money are they spending per engineer hour? How much does it cost to build this feature? This is the sort of question that you can ask yourself, and then look at, how do I build that cost? There's lots of different ways you can calculate the cost of a feature, and that depends on the industry you're in, it depends on the size of teams. I'm actually trying to develop some formulas for it, but it's very difficult because it depends on so many factors. But on the face value of it, asking yourself questions like, how much is engineering costing the business? How much is it costing to produce this button? How much is it going to cost to produce this button?
Yeah.
Those are the kind of ways that you start developing a more strategic mindset, because you're thinking outside of engineering and thinking about the business impact.
Awesome. Well, I'm really glad that you mentioned the executive mindset. I was in touch with Eric Nerlich, who worked as the chief of staff at Google, and he is also a big proponent of this. He noticed that this significantly helps people to progress their careers. So I guess I'll need to connect you guys because
I'd love
you
to
seem
speak
to
to
be
him.
on the same. Awesome.
Absolutely. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No worries. Okay, and so we were talking about stage two CTOs who are working for organizations with 200 employees, was it? 100?
No, so stage through two is 10 to 50
Mhm.
engineers, and then stage three is 50 to 100. Stage four is like 100 to 300 engineers.
Mhm.
And then stage five is like 500 plus.
Awesome. So would you say the executive mindset is becoming more important in the stage 3, 4, 5, or is it something that even those CTOs for smaller organizations should start developing?
I mean, I think when you are building an MVP, you actually, people think, oh, I don't do strategy because we're just a small company. We're just doing, we don't spend hours and hours on strategy. And that's true. You don't, and you shouldn't. You should be literally, your strategy is deliver something, like at that stage, your strategy is deliver something. But the thing that a lot of people miss is that the strategic mindset is very important, even in the early days, because it helps you focus on the stuff that customers might buy. And being strategic means always focusing on the outcome. Strategy, is basically an approach to achieving an outcome. It comes from military, where the strategy was to win the battle, because ultimately then you win the war, right? And people think the strategy is this massive, abstract, weird, complex thing. But actually, being strategic essentially means, well, what is the best way for us to do? What is the best approach for us to take to achieve this big business goal? And I think it's really important, because in the early stages, having a strategic mindset helps you focus your efforts, which are tiny. Have tiny little resources, helps you focus those resources on the most important stuff. But then the strategic mindset, then when you go to stage through 2, 3, 4, 5, then it changes, because actually it helps you again focus your efforts on the most important things. But you're also, it becomes much more complex because of all the stakeholders you have, because now there's a product that people are buying, and you need to refine how to make it cheaper for yourself to produce that product to the same level of quality. So that strategic mindset changes in polarity as the company grows. But I think having a strategic mindset, which is essentially looking at the outcome, that's what to me a strategic mindset means. Strategic is, are you focusing on the outcomes, or are you just doing stuff for the sake of ticking the box and saying that you've done it?
Awesome. Well, I think a lot of people should subscribe to your newsletter about the executive mindset.
Thank you.
So we will include it in the show notes. Do you still have like 5 minutes to continue? Because
Sure.
it's, we are just getting to our 1 hour scheduled, but there is still one or two pressing questions that I just need to ask you, because some of the people from our community, they are VPs, directors or VP of engineering, and they are looking at the next step. They would like to become CTOs, but often, the jump is hard because the employer, the hiring managers, the stakeholders, they are often asking, have you been involved in this strategic decision making? Have you been in touch with other stakeholders? And as VPs, they have not really. So, what would you advise to these people who are looking at the next step of their career?
So I will tell you, and actually not just from VP, but also from literally engineer, the people that became CTO very, very fast were the ones who are nosy. And by nosy, I mean proactively, you're VP of engineering, that's great. But proactively talking to the CTO and to the other departments about the impact of engineering on the bottom line. So proactively, so a lot of VPs of engineering think that their job is just to deliver this product. Okay, it's operations. But actually, the way you become a strategic thinker and you open yourself to the opportunity of becoming a CTO, a true CTO, rather than a CTO just in title, is to become curious about the business case of everything you do. And therefore, if you become nosy, that's why I call it nosy. If you proactively talk to the other departments to try to improve the engineering delivery, but also to understand, how is this impacting sales? Like us producing this feature, how is that impacting sales? One CEO who used to be an engineer in a company, the very successful company here in Cambridge, where I know the other founders. He said to me that when he was an engineer, his CEO showed him and his team how the product they'd been working on for the last 2 years had produced $0. Zero. And he was shocked because, to him and his team, they were like, oh, yeah, we're producing all this amazing features and amazing stuff. And he only became a strategic person and therefore later started his own company as CEO when he realized that what matters is, well, the code that we produced, did that actually produce any money for the business? Did that actually create any customers or retain customers? So the way you can step up is do the job before you're promoted or you secure that role. Proactively speak to the other departments, proactively become curious to understand how your department, your team, is impacting those departments. What's the chain all the way to sales? What's the chain all the way to the bottom line or to the profit margins? And have those conversations with your boss, and also ask your boss, the CTO, to perhaps sometimes give you opportunities to present to the C-suite, to present to the board.
And it's really interesting now when I'm kind of thinking about what we were discussing the last 30, 40 minutes. Like, we haven't really talked about any technology, right? So would you say that this is less and less important in the stages 2, 3, 4, 5? Like, does it no longer matters? And is the executive mindset and strategic thinking so much more important?
Well, that's a really good question. The technology knowledge matters. However, the technology knowledge is only valuable when coupled with not business acumen. And this is what a lot of people who want to become CTOs or who are CTOs don't understand. They think, well, I'm the world expert at nano microparticles or semiconductor, blah, blah, blah. That's great. However, have you been able to deploy that into a sellable product that made profit for people? If you haven't, the technology part is great, but it's not the be all and end all. So a good chief technology officer can produce a prototype, can envision where the product might be going technically, it's up to date with the latest developments in their industry and where other products might be going. I'm not saying they should deny their technology prowess and their technology knowledge. There's a reason why they're called the CTO. But the difference between that and them making use of the expertise in their team, this is where a lot of CTOs start feeling attacked. They think, oh, I can't have this world expert at, let's say, microparticles, nanoparticles. I can't have this world expert coming into my team because I need to be the most technically competent person. You're not necessarily, as a CTO, you are not necessarily the most technically competent person. As a CTO, you understand technology, but you don't necessarily need to know it to the nitty-gritty, because you can hire experts to do that detail, but you can have vision. That's the thing. You have the vision to see where the technology is going. And one CTO, actually the CTO of Ocado Technologies, which in the UK is quite a successful company, he said to me once in a chat we had, he said, as a CTO, I have to be able to look around corners. And that was the best summary that I've heard of someone explaining what the technology part of CTO is about. It's not about being the best geek in the room.
Yeah, very interesting. And to be the strategic thinker, right? You just mentioned this phrase a while ago, and it really stuck with me because probably I also need to read a book about becoming a strategic thinker. Is there anything like this? Is this something that you know a bit more about, and would you recommend some literature or some newsletter or something?
Yeah, so that's it's a very good question. I have to tell you, this is one of the reasons why I do what I do. I personally have not seen something that satisfied me when I needed to understand what strategy meant. So, there's books like Good Strategy, Bad Strategy, and other books about strategy in general. However, about the strategic mindset and about, I remember 15 years ago, my boss said to me, Adelina, you're not thinking strategically about this. And I said to her, well, can you tell me what strategic thinking would look like for this situation? And she couldn't answer the question.
Mm.
And this is the problem, that most people don't know how to explain and help people understand how to think strategically. And when I work one to one with CTOs, one of the things that I love is showing them for their own situation. You're thinking right now as an individual contributor or as an operational leader at best.
Mhm.
But this is how you'd be thinking if you were a strategic engineering leader.
Mm.
So I'm trying to think if I can give you a recent example. But so one thing, like I suppose the simplest one I can give is one where well, actually, look, is, for example, a non-strategic leader will say, oh, we have to build, you have to build these features, and they decide on those features because they'd like to see those features themselves being launched in the world. It's something they want to see happening, because they have, this is the sort of stuff that they feel it's very easy for them to do technically, and also because they think it would be really, really cool to be at the cutting edge of producing that sort of stuff, right? That's how a engineering focused leader thinks, but they're not a strategic business leader, right? A strategic business technologist looks at what are the trends in the market in our industry, how can our product change to keep up with how customers' needs will change in the next 3 years, and how can our product be redesigned so we produce it at the same level of quality, but it's cheaper for the company to produce at scale. And they talk to customer success, they talk to the marketing people, they talk and say what comes out from the marketing, what feedback do we get from marketing, what feedback do we get from customer retention, what feedback do we get from customer success. So you see, they take a global view of what's happening. Where's the business going? What's the business trying to achieve? So, for example, how does our product need to look like when we have 10,000 or 100,000 users rather than just 1,000 users?
Mm.
So they think about the business outcomes and how technology underpins that and delivers that, rather than, oh, I'm producing this feature because I think this feature would be cool, which is what I've
Mm.
seen a lot of CTOs, or I'm producing this feature because that's what we've always done, in big corporations where you have a stale CTO.
Mm.
And yeah, they just kind of regurgitate the stuff that's been done for the last 30 years.
Yeah, wow, this was super powerful, and I hope everyone listening will now rewind 5 minutes and listen to this part again, because it was full of golden nuggets, and I'll do the same once I have the recording ready as well. No, I mean, now it's also kind of easier than it used to be years ago with ChatGPT, for example, to role play, because this is a language that someone needs to adopt, right, to be comfortable. Like some of the phrases that you just used, they are awesome. And if this was a job interview, I would hire you right away for whatever role.
Yeah, I've been offered many CTO roles that I never accept them because I don't actually have the technology piece.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm not an expert in any particular technology.
Mm.
Therefore, I could actually never do the CTO role because I have the business acumen side of it, but I'm not an expert in any technology. I don't know
Mm.
any technology well enough that would make me worthy of being a CTO.
Mm. Awesome. But the strategic thinking, the business acumen, I mean, the phrases you use, that's just awesome.
And those are things a CTO with the
Mhm.
technology expertise can learn. It's
Yeah.
much easier for them to learn the business acumen stuff than it would be for me to learn
Mhm.
technology to the level of knowledge that they have.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, now I think a lot of people are inspired to learn and to get to the next level. So if they would like to connect with you, where they can, find you and subscribe for more information.
On LinkedIn, I'm on LinkedIn, Adelina Chalmers. I'm the only Adelina Chalmers on LinkedIn, so you should be able to find me very easily. And I have this executive mindset CTO newsletter on LinkedIn as well. I also have a website called geekwhisperer.co.uk. It's more like a brochure. I don't update it in any particular way other than just listing the sort of stuff we do. But I'm also on Medium as well. People can follow my articles on Medium as well. And I share on LinkedIn quite a bit.
Awesome. So I'll include these links in the show notes and also on YouTube in the description. Cool. Well, awesome. Thanks a lot for staying even longer than we booked. Thanks for sharing. The last golden nugget was awesome. So thanks for sharing everything with us. And yeah, I hope to be in touch with you soon again.
Thank you very much for having me, Michal.